Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Everegg. And Steve, we're back on a non-GDT week, just with some trade highlights. We just completed Trade Insights that's been mailed to subscribers this week.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got some other interesting tidbits to talk about and, of course, chart of the week.
Yeah, okay. Let's get into it. So a little earlier this month, we were able to add up everything with the data available. So it shows a little bit of a bounce in total trade volumes. Milk solids equivalent is a measure on this, and
it was for November, wasn't it?
November's actual data. That's
yes.
right. So there's a couple of big reasons why that happened. But when you look back over the year, I mean, this is over the last year. Yes, there's a widening gap. But when you go back, we're very close to the 20 and 21 volumes around the same time.
Yeah.
And it's an odd thing, even though this dark line looks really quite different to the orange, they're virtually line ball over the full 12 months.
That's right. Just a bit of different bumps in seasonality.
And at a product level, it was whole milk powder that had the biggest surge in total. Quite a, and we'll talk about that because we've got some reasons that happened. But cheese, pretty solid. Butterfat's up a lot as well. So quite a diverse set of numbers. And when you look at the regions, we've got a rebound in Southeast Asia is probably the standout that we should talk about, and that's the one that we'll be looking for. Middle East and North Africa still there, adding volume, but we're still not seeing much come out of China. That's turning that round after a few months there of decline. So yeah, it's still a very mixed bag. So Southeast Asia whole milk powder was the big rebound.
Yeah, a huge spike there in that November data.
As a single month, it's one of the highest we've seen. So when we cut into that, this is essentially a lot of trade moving at low prices.
Yeah.
So it's like we've got to that point where it's clear out time. And so most of the Southeast Asian markets took a lot more volume in that month. We won't dig into that detail, but it's just interesting that, the timing of this, we've probably still got some way to go on those prices. But when we look at the wider picture, what's also helping the market a bit is the fact that there's less product available out of South America to the external market. And so this month we saw another high tonnage going into Brazil, and that's taken it to a record annual total of trade across border. So that's helping clear the path for New Zealand exports into other regions.
And you've got that Brazil whole milk powder premium there, Steve.
So it's essentially the difference between export prices out of the region and what Brazil is paying internally for. So that we just keep that as a measure of the attractiveness of those imports. Not the highest we've seen, but certainly supportive and improving. So skim milk powder is also interesting.
Yeah, that had a little bit of a revival, but obviously not back to where it was.
No, you can just see that the size of those monthly tonnages is still well below, the prevailing volumes we saw before. But when we look at, this trend line, we just started to flicker, like we've been going sideways a bit. We're still not showing upward growth. This is a rolling annual tonnage, so
it's well below that trend still, isn't it?
Yeah, achingly so. Again, looking at ship prices, they're down in terms of what New Zealand is shipping. Those average prices are down back to the intervention heydays when we were clearing big stocks out of Europe, which saw the market rise over time, but we haven't seen shipped prices out in New Zealand this low since first half of 2019.
It's interesting, isn't it, that gap has closed so much, but it really reflects how much more skim's available from New Zealand now that they've tried to shift away from whole milk powder to maintain the balance in that market. They've got a lot more skim to sell and they've got to match prices.
Yeah, and the US also had plenty of product available in that period.
Yep. So is this going to be a sustainable thing, Steve, is the question?
Well, let's have a look at this little indicator. So we're not saying that, those two orange bars are what the shipped prices out of New Zealand were in those 2 months to Southeast Asia, so it's region specific. These are the average FOB prices out of GDT results for C2 contracts in the period since July.
Yep.
So we see most of that October-November business we think is probably written a little, back in that period, probably late Q2, maybe very early Q3, given the usual lag in shipping. but it shows prices have a fair way to go below that on GDT events afterwards.
Yes.
So while these things won't always line up, you do get some products shipped, in the second month. I would indicate we would say that we'll see more volumes at low prices in the next couple of months.
Yeah, but maybe beyond that.
Beyond
not
that,
so
we're going to run
sustainable.
into a lift.
Yep.
And so this is, why all the disappointing talk in the market about the lack of demand is that maybe we've had a lot of the short-term need filled out of this low price period.
Yep.
Cleared the decks a bit, and then as we look into, the requirements into Q2 next year, that looks a bit sad.
You mean this year?
This year, sorry. Yes. Gosh, we have got away with it. Into 24 and you forgot.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just saying that, while I think we'll see, the headwinds are still there at those higher prices and the difficulties in those markets.
Yeah. So that bump in trade is probably unlikely to be sustained. Interesting.
Just changing the theme a bit, looking at milk production in Europe, always something to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm.
But while this stuff sort of ticks along, we've had a coming together of sorts in December. Well, I think officially, Vuko told me this morning, in our guess on November's milk is down 2.6.
Yep.
In the month of November, based on what we've seen. December will be a little better, and you can see France and Germany, the big two producers, got a little closer to the prior year.
Yep.
And then we've had this interesting hook. Looks like both dipped down in the second week of January. Probably cold weather has driven some of that.
Or some co-ops not reported.
Yeah. That could easily.
You never know.
So it's, what we're seeing in Europe is quite a bit of sideways action on both fat and protein prices, with the uncertainty of what lies ahead in spring.
Sure.
So here we are with production. It'll be interesting to see where it goes in coming weeks, but that's
still a lot of uncertainty around that, isn't there? Into spring.
Back home,
gosh, we're all over the place.
We are. Back in the Australian market, this is an Australian comparison to New Zealand of the commodity value of milk. So the yellow and green lines are commodity milk values based on the commodity shipments of product into export markets based on local quotes.
So they're spot price quotes, so they move every week.
They do.
Yep.
And these are in Australian dollars.
Yes.
Compare those to the dotted lines, which are the Australian average milk price being paid, and the current New Zealand estimate. What's interesting? A few things interesting here is how big the gap is between Australian milk prices and what product is worth.
Yeah, so no wonder our local milk processors are feeling a great deal of pain at the moment.
Yeah, that's not to say all Australian milk is achieving that low value, because there is quite a bit of retail business at more stable prices. But the issue here is whether those commodity values can lift, and whether obviously there's going to be pressure on new season prices in a few months' time.
Mm-hmm.
But just where's the upside potential in commodity values going forward, given we've seen sideways momentum from the European market, which is dragged into Oceania in terms of skim. We've got a little bit more support for butterfat. But if we're looking at cheese,
which cheese is the most important product for this measure in Australia, given the share of manufacturing milk that goes into cheese.
Yeah. So here's an interesting comparison we dug out with the help of our colleagues in Everag, that the way milk is being valued into cheese in each of the major regions. Mindful of the fact the US is tracked downwards most of the last 6 months.
Yeah.
They're still knocking out more cheese. Still, milk production is only just below water this year. And so if anything, where's the potential for upside pressure on cheese? It ain't going to come quickly, and it's going to be more down towards the red line than those other two. So this is something to keep an eye on. I think, the US market is still languishing without export success, but it just means everything's going to stay very competitive in the export market.
It sure is.
For those incremental volumes.
Mm-hmm.
Chart of the week, Jo.
Chart of the week. Well, again, just continuing, actually, we're still in the Oceania region. We thought we'd have a look at New Zealand milk production, because the latest data for December was a fairly healthy increase in milk production. We've had a good increase in solids production in December, probably a little bit stronger than maybe people were expecting. There's always a lot of focus on the pasture growth index and what that was doing, but the outcome's been some fairly positive milk production increases. And what's really interesting, Steve, is the components of this milk.
Yeah.
That has really increased quite significantly for that August to December period when, again, we were supposed to have this El Nino event, which not always dries out New Zealand, but, not always great for New Zealand either.
Yeah.
But what we've actually achieved is pretty good components from good pasture conditions.
So December was the first month that the volume of milk increased year on year since the start of the season. But we've had several months of good solids, as you say. That's, the pasture quality just lifted well above prior years. So can they keep that up? Good grass growth.
Yeah.
So things are a bit different in January. It's got a lot drier, a lot harder, but that's probably going to change the direction of that milk output. Anyway, that's enough from us. Thanks for viewing. We'll be back next week, and we hope you'll join us.